see your avatar. Now, I know many of you, like, obviously I know Patricia and Howard and Pam and Fred Golden. I know you're all regular patrons of not only the opera, but the arts in general. I'd be curious to get a sense of everybody else in the room. How many of you regularly attend either the opera or any of the other performing arts? And what are the ways in which these types of activities and organizations affect and enrich your lives? How does what we do relate to you? That would help me. I have a little bit more understanding of the room. Will help me focus on the right topics.
I've attended the opera, Met Opera on by satellite.
Right.
And before the pandemic, and they did an amazing job. And then I've also followed them online because the Met Opera has offered certain operas online that I can watch on my laptop. And then I have attended some of the, Judith and I have attended some of the performances that have been at the Granada.
Okay, cool. Anybody else care to chime in?
Yeah, 3 of them are muted.
Don't be shy, unmute yourself.
Peggy and Bill, we do symphony and ensemble, occasional opera.
Music Academy.
Music Academy. And what does it do? It expands our thinking and our experiences, and sometimes provides calmness and sometimes doesn't, and beauty. So those are the reasons we go.
Right. Anybody else?
Hi, Steve here. I attend the ensemble theater productions, symphony, Music Academy, and I go mostly for the enjoyment and the pleasure of the entertainment.
Right. Great. Anybody else? Barbara? Sherry?
Just seen the Nutcracker there.
Okay.
Barbara and Sherry are still muted.
Oh, sorry, another Barbara. Miss.
Yeah, no, the other Barbara.
Walsh.
Okay. So the I guess I'm gonna talk a little bit about what's been going on with us and with the industry in the last well, what is it now? 14 months?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you all, since you are following arts organizations, you have been following some of their communications, online programming. You have some experience in how different organizations have been trying to come to terms with what has been within, obviously, the pandemic has been a particular crisis in the performing arts. It's been a very difficult time, and in many ways, different organizations took different approaches. I will tell you a little bit about, with the assumption that you have some familiarity with what Opera Santa Barbara and companies like ours do during normal times. I'd like to give you a little bit of a perspective of how we dealt with this and where we're going forward. In March of 2020, our industry at large froze. One of the first assumptions that was made was obviously the intuitive assumption is to say when we're asking people to isolate and stay at home and not be around strangers, the first thing that comes to mind that you have to shut down is theaters. And that makes a lot of sense, of course. However, it doesn't really answer, it just sort of left a huge vacuum to how we're going to relate to our audiences, what indeed our purpose is if we can't put on shows. The other question that quickly came after that is, okay, we're going to close, cancel some shows, and presumably we will be back. How long are we going to be out of business? And what is the environment going to look like once we return? Where are the opportunities while our physical theaters remain closed? Obviously, these were not questions that any of us were equipped to answer. In the performing arts, we deal with uncertainty, we're dealing with randomness, and we're dealing with conflicting information all the time. But this was just simply too big for anybody to grapple with. An assumption that was made early on was that the theaters will be the first ones to close and the last ones to reopen. And that is indeed what's happening. It's become a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the things that we pretty quickly at Upper Santa Barbara we decided was that while we're trying to understand what's going on and what our role in it is and how do we fulfill our mission or temporarily repurpose our mission based on what we do best. Our first and foremost responsibility was to put out a message of courage and hope. Almost exclusively, all the messaging we were getting out, we were getting anywhere from businesses, from nonprofits, was a message of gloom, if not doom. We sort of decided to take a different tone, and that a tone of hope and tone of saying, this will be over, and the arts need to remain here, and the arts are going to be there for society and for each one of the persons in our community in every way we can. We're not giving anything up. So we actually never had any type of, we never issued a summary cancellation. At the time where in March of 2020, we happened to be very lucky to be in a relatively stable financial position, but also we seem to have, without knowing it, having prepared for this type of crisis, if you will, not prepared, but put ourselves in a position that I think put us in somewhat, in a position that we're able to take the time to assess and make decisions. In that, having operated for many years as a small player in an extremely competitive arts market, we had over time developed a strategy of too small to fail, which we started, that's the informal term I coined back when I took over as general director when Nancy Golden was board chair. And that ultimately means that we are a small company. We are focusing on the things that we do well. We don't try to be all things to all people. And that we have a very nimble team. We have a very small team. We have very close relationships of staff and board. And we are accustomed to making quick decisions. We are also sort of a little bit have developed the audacity to march to our own drummer most of the time, which I think helped us during the last 14 months. Because we did focus on a very positive message, and we focused on the message of we're not shutting down, we're not canceling anything wholesale. And even early on, we focused on reopening advocacy. We did that because a lot of the assumptions about why live music can't happen or why people can't congregate safely to enjoy live music, they were just not holding up to scrutiny. They were just, largely psychological. Of course, you don't want to be around a lot of people. We all know that. And clearly you don't want to be around people who are not wearing masks. However, other industries like restaurants or the churches were open as early as May of 2020, and we were not. So we started, on one hand, sort of informally trying to educate our constituents about the possibilities that were out there. Trying to explain that if you have 30 masked people in a church courtyard attending mass, how is that different from having the same 30 people masked in a park listening to a piano recital? Those things seem to be, to us, seem very straightforward, but we were surprised to see how little traction those arguments had, especially with government. So part of it was patiently explaining why the safety guidelines were there, our capability to enforce them was there. In fact, our industry at large, the Event Safety Alliance, one of the largest collaborative organizations that includes event producers, nonprofit organization leaders, lawyers, doctors, insurance people, stagehands, issued reopening guidelines as early as May 2020. And I'm here to tell you that those are exactly the same guidelines that we're going to be using in June when we return to the theater. So to us, all that information was known. But unfortunately, our business at large did not do a good job of propagating this information, explaining to people why, attending the arts or even participating is not a death sentence. The other thing that the board did, and I'm extremely grateful for, is that during the summer, when it was clear that our workforce will remain unemployed for a long period of time, adopted as an item of mission to support artists while we're shut down, and to do that in any way we could. Part of it was we were among the first small companies to do stream programming. As soon as we were shut down, we just basically went to our archive and we said, what do we have available? We picked three things that we really liked, and we put the full recorded opera online. And we made sure that everybody who had participated in those activities got paid. That was extremely important because more than anybody else, artists, stagehands, orchestra musicians, dancers have suffered from this more than almost any other sector because they were never allowed to go back to work in any way, shape, or form. We also felt the responsibility to not disassemble our team. So we kept everybody on staff, nobody got laid off. And in the fall, we made a commitment. I outlined a commitment to our donors that Opera Santa Barbara will return to live performance within 30 days of the time that we're given permission. And I'm pleased to say that we are going to make good on that promise by presenting our first opera in the Lobero Theater on June the 27th. Other things that we did was while we were fascinated by the new opportunity that streaming media presented, and we watched with great interest everything that everybody else in the industry was doing, we also went back to the too small to fail idea. We're a small company. We are just not positioned to transition from an opera company to being MTV. So we decided that we are going to insist on maintaining our capability of producing live events, of making those efforts necessary that would allow us to do whatever we could while theaters were closed. And only a small part of what we do will focus on digital media. So there was a message about, no, we are returning to live, we're returning to live. And so I would like to think that we sort of, at the very least, we kept the hope for that alive. It took a lot longer than any of us expected, of course. But it was basically about reassuring people that live performance is coming back, that we keep all our employees employed and busy, and funnel those funds that were generously given to us by the donors and by the government through the PPP loans, channeling as much of that money as possible to our workforce. In the spirit of keeping live music alive, we became as creative as we could. We found ways that we can present live music without violating the rules and without putting anybody at risk. And some of you may have heard about our Music on the Balcony series. We have a second floor balcony on the corner of Sola and Santa Barbara. So back in the summer, we started putting music up there for maybe an hour on the Friday around happy hour. Of course, there's no admission to the building. There's no seating, but restaurants are open. So people could, grab a table at the nearby restaurants, hear some live music. We were very heartened by the response. We really saw that people really wanted live music. It was different than anything else. So we expanded that, eventually county allowed live music at dining establishments. Again, although we were grateful for that, it was never explained to us while it is safe to have live music played to you while you're eating, while it's not if you're not. But nevertheless, we started what we call the Operation Eurydice, which it aspired to revitalize the devastated live music scene. So we went outside of opera. The spirit here is that opera is the unity of so many different types of performing arts. Well, we took that up to the next level. So we tried to create jobs not only for opera singers and classical musicians, but also for rock bands and jazz bands and blues singers and just about everything else. So we partnered with dining establishments that per the county order were allowed to have live music, and all of whom had been also very damaged by months of closure and then closures and reopenings and limited capacity and having to build terraces on the street. And we provided live music. That was very well received. The musicians obviously were very grateful to have the work. The restaurants saw their business increasing. And above all, we saw the joy in people's eyes. Up until the pandemic hit, I always said that the thing we do best at the opera is make people cry. Now I guess we've added to our credits that we can make people smile. So that's sort of where we, in addition, we found out that we could safely and pursuant to the regulations have live opera at the drive-in, that Concerts in Your Car in Ventura at the Ventura Fairgrounds had successfully and safely produced live events in a drive-in format since June 2020. So we met with them and eventually presented 2 opera performances, one in December, which was Carmen. Ironically, that was about 8 hours before, it finished about 8 hours before the second stay-at-home order went in effect. Let me tell you that was about 3 or 4 days that I didn't get a lot of sleep. And after that, we presented our comedy Don Pasquale also there in early April. As soon as I said, we never reduced our readiness to prepare for a performance. We had made a commitment that we would return to live performance within 30 days of the time that we are allowed. So that when we had a third drive-in performance planned with Wagner's Das Rheingold in the abridged version by Jonathan Dove, that it was going to be at Concerts in Your Car in the drive-in in early June. And as soon as the governor announced that California is going to lift all restrictions on June 15, I got on the phone first with our board, the executive committee, then with my staff, and we decided that we're going to take that show that was originally supposed to be in the drive-in and put it inside the Lobero Theater on June the 27th. It's an hour and a half, an hour and 15-minute show. It's going to be reduced capacity in the theater. We do not know the exact number because we're supposed to wait for the guidelines before we announce it. I can tell you that I have no intention of having more than 50% capacity, even if that is allowed. And we're waiting to hear what the exact protocols. Also, we have been in dialogue with our constituents. We had several surveys during the last 14 months to see what people expect of us, what they're comfortable with, what they're not. The most recent survey indicated that a very large number of constituents are comfortable with indoors events as long as that they're reduced capacity. So we are hearing them as well. And we're very excited to go back and not only do the first opera inside after 14 months, but also be doing our first Wagner in an abbreviated and I would say very entertaining production. For next season, again, everybody's still, we're all trying to figure out what's going on, right? I mean, we went from fairly severe lockdown to some openness, and then all of a sudden dealing with the prospect of June 15, everything is open. So we sort of don't really know what to do with that information. We already had some plans for next season when that announcement was made, and those plans were based on a conservative approach that we're not gonna go all in because there's still a lot of unknowns. And instead of producing our traditionally 3 large grand operas in our flagship venues, we were going to plan a season of 5 operas that are, which each one of which is going to be smaller. Smaller for us means no more than about an hour and a half long, no intermission, no chorus, small orchestra, and flexible production structures. One of the things, just to give you an example, as you know, when we do a traditional grand opera, the orchestra is in the pit. At the time that this season was conceived, I was not necessarily feeling that our musicians will be ready to get into the Granada pit 40 at a time. Now that seems the atmosphere is more encouraging, but nevertheless, I think there are probably a lot more hurdles that we're going to have to jump over, including audience willingness to participate, regulations, how our workforce feels about this. So we have a 5 opera season that will be announced soon that involves small pieces, except for the last one, but we are planning on returning Grand Opera to its former splendor with the production of La Traviata that we had originally planned for 2020 in the Granada Theater in June 2022. So I guess that's more or less of an overview of Opera Santa Barbara since March 2020. I'm happy to answer any other questions or elaborate on this or just about anything else you want to talk about, really.
I'll start. I had to briefly leave because Joan Rutkowski, the Opera Santa Barbara board chair, just called me, and she said, "Quick, go back and listen to Costis." So, yeah, that was a great. I think what I got to hear, a great explanation of what Opera Santa Barbara and the board and you, Costis, have had to go through with this COVID. And boy, it sure makes me excited about having live theater again, live music. It's not the same without it. So
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for other questions, I have a question for you guys. One of the things that I feel rather uncertain of, and I'm sort of trying to factor into my plans and my projections for next season is, supposedly regulations are being lifted on June the 15th. I think there's going to be a time for people to adjust. I don't think necessarily everybody's going to be ready to go, to a full ballpark or full theater on June 16th. I think people are going to have different levels of of comfort, and we're still working out the, do we have to wear masks? If not, where? And some people won't go anywhere if they can't have a mask, and some people won't go anywhere if they have to have a mask. So it's all, so I'm gonna have to be basically, as I develop how we do things, well, do I make masks mandatory? That's gonna make some people stay away. Do I not make masks mandatory? That will make the other people stay away. But my overall question is, when we get to about, so say, assuming that we get to the fall and we haven't had another surge and we haven't had any bad news of any sort, do you think that people will be anxious and ready to leave their homes, to that people will see the value of getting dressed and buying a ticket of not negligible dollar value to go to a live show when they can stay home and have performances from all over the world streamed to the living room for very little money or for nothing?
I think people are excited to get ready to go back. I think there is some fear of masking or not masking, because if you've been vaccinated, you don't supposedly have to mask, but how do you know that? Do you require that before they buy a ticket and only let vaccinated people come? I mean, that's another thing, because you don't know who you're sitting next to, even if
Right.
there's a couple of spaces between your seats.
Yeah, I mean, just to that point, for us, we are we haven't announced the full protocols for Das Rheingold in June, because obviously those will depend on if there's any guidelines from the government, if there are any guidelines from the industry, and also all the compliance factors that the Lobero Theater itself has to be in. But at this point, we're thinking that being vaccinated will be a requirement to attend that performance. It seems that is, based on what we know now, first time out after 14 months, it does seem that is the prudent thing to do. It's not an effort to exclude anyone, but I think it's sort of and also it seems to me that, and again, I'm sort of looking at the people who are in our circles, the people that I interact with, who are donors, who are patrons, who attend the arts, not just the opera, but other organizations. It seems that the overwhelming majority of our core audience is already vaccinated. And so therefore, hopefully, requiring people to be vaccinated will not pose a difficulty to a lot of folks.
Kostis, let me ask you, in the best of all worlds, presuming, October, September, next opera would be 4 or 5 months down the road and things will clearly change, hopefully for the better. In the best of all worlds, what do you see as a possible program schedule for next year? What would you like to be able to do, given our circumstances?
Well, we've already planned next season, and I'm not at liberty to disclose it right now, but it will be published soon. And we made a plan. We started making this plan sometime in, well, obviously I had started making about 12 different plans a lot earlier, but I convened with the artistic committee and the board and the staff, and we kind of kicked this around for a while. Spoke with singers, spoke with orchestra musicians, and we're sticking to this plan, which is, it involves 5 operas, one the first weekend of October, one the last weekend of October, one in mid-January, one in mid-March, and one in June. The first 4 are all going to be sort of short and chamber-sized, and we saw this, we wanted to be cautious, because again, I don't want to jinx anything, but people are talking about 3rd and 4th waves. How do I know we're not going to have spiking numbers in the fall and there are going to be some more regulations in place? I certainly hope that there won't be, but I also I don't want to hitch my wagon to the assumption that there will not be. But also we saw this as an artistic opportunity. So we've decided that we can't go big right away, or that we shouldn't go big right away. So we decided that that's not a problem. So we're doing some things that we wouldn't otherwise do. We're doing some programming that I've been wanting to do for a long time that includes contemporary and classical pieces, but pieces that wouldn't neatly fit within a season of grand opera like we had before, because they are lesser known, because they are shorter, because, it's a whole new world. And I think we are, absent any other information, we've decided to just redesign our season and how we do business.
So, yeah, several shorter ones.
Okay.
I would strongly propose that you perform Un ballo e maschera during the season.
Thank you. We can't do it this season, but it has been on my wish list for a very long time. And actually, it's a piece that's very, a lot of our longtime board members are very fond of, because the company produced it once before and they loved it many years ago. And as a matter of fact, it was actually the first opera I ever conducted. So I have a special feelings about that opera. I think it's Verdi's most tuneful opera, probably the highest concentration of great tunes, ensembles. I referred to it as Verdi's operetta, not because it's light, but because it has that energy, it has production numbers, it's like toe-tapping tunes, and just absolutely magnificent. Yes, I promise you that we will do it while I'm still here, which I hope will be a long time.
What's the name of it?
A masked ball.
Un ballo in maschera.
Il ballo in maschera is the entire title. That means masked ball.
So then you wouldn't have any argument about wearing masks.
There you go. There you go. Although I don't know, who knows, maybe after a while, people will want to forget about the masks and I won't be able to do it. If they're wearing masks, I'm not going.
If you wear a ball mask and a COVID mask, there won't be anything to see.
That's right. That's right.
Trustees, can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
First,
Fred.
first, congratulations on navigating and maneuvering through a very difficult season. That's great for a sailor like you, because you went through a lot of different markers and managed to come out well. First, about masks.
By the way, I appreciate the sailing analogies.
Well, it's appropriate for today, right?
Right.
The upcoming production, I saw a Baroque opera the other night, streamed from Pittsburgh. I think it was live. The singers wore masks. Are you planning to have the singers masks in this upcoming? Okay.
No. No, it is no longer required. We believe that it is safe for the singers to not be masked. Our protocols include, we're only hiring vaccinated performers, and they will have 2 tests during the 2-week period that they will be here. Again, I respect what other companies do. Everybody has their own threshold of what is acceptable and what is not. And that's all well and good. I'm glad that they did it. In fact, Pittsburgh Opera did a live performance as early as, I believe, last October. And they were wearing masks. And at that time, there's no other way they could have gone on with the show. So I'm just really thrilled that they did it. They've seemed to have carried off that protocol into maybe they planned it this way. It's a big company. They plan things long term. So they had planned, and it's fine. But for us, it's not required. We feel comfortable. The singers feel comfortable. The singers don't like wearing masks while they sing. And mostly the audience doesn't like looking at them. So, and we feel comfortable that California does not require it. So we're good to go.
I would think wearing masks while singing Wagner would be quite difficult. Another question, you draw a distinction between digital streaming and live performance, but why insist on that division? You can do both at the same time. You could actually, in effect, broadcast your live performances.
Thank you, Fred. That's a great question.
Audience.
That's a great question.
It's
as I said before, we are, and as you know very well, we're small. Doing more things requires more people, requires more capabilities, requires more skills, and all that takes more time and money. If you follow those companies that have gone to, at the time that they couldn't have live, they went to streaming, it was a whole host of new things. There was equipment, where to film these things. They basically became film producers. That takes a lot to do, and that's not our business. We don't feel we can do this well for the resources that we have. The second is that in general, and I think in most cases, a show that is produced and staged for a live audience inside a theater does not translate to the TV screen. I mean, it translates to some degree, and you have good, video people, and you have good singers, good actors. Of course, it's enjoyable, but it's still not the real McCoy. What has happened now is because of so many companies haven't gone out and haven't gone so good at producing events for the internet, and because we have the long time that the Metropolitan Opera and then other major companies filmed operas with extraordinary budgets. I mean, one of those HD broadcasts of the Met probably costs more than our entire annual budget.
Yeah.
So people have accustomed to a level of quality. I can't get close to that. So therefore, I don't want to put it out there and be unfavorably compared. Back in April, when we did our first 3 streams we basically streamed videos from 3 past operas, we felt comfortable doing that because that was an emergency. After that, there was a lot of streaming programming, and frankly, a lot of it was better than what we would have done for streaming. And also, obviously, as many of you may know, with some exceptions, you really don't recoup any of the expenses for these streams by having a paywall. And that's why for us, we decided that we're not going to charge for any of our online programming. It is easier that way. And most importantly, if people haven't bought a ticket, they can't complain that it wasn't good enough. All right, Barbara, anything else?
No, unless anybody else has any other questions.
Well, let me offer my admiration for your persistence in all of this. And of course, for us mariners on the COVID scene, remember that social distancing is 1 fathom.
Yes, indeed. So I sure hope to see next time to see you guys in person at the Yacht Club. I was there last night. I had a great time. And I hear you have some, renovation coming up.
That's
So
right.
I look forward to see what happens there.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Maybe one day you'll be able to come back and do a live Monday Forum.
Yes, and maybe we can have a live opera performance if you want.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everybody.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.